And like I said, I was just being a little facetious there at the beginning. This with the Coast to Coast AM theme, where this isn't even remotely close to being as good as Coast to Coast AM. They're really good at what they do. But anyways, a subject that I find absolutely fascinating, and I hope that you do too, is the theory of Planet X, Nibiru, and Wormwood. Now, as you know, in the Bible, Wormwood is it's mentioned in the book of Revelations, actually. And it's a translation. I guess it is it's from Greek. The Greek text is absinthos, and that translates into English as wormwood, and that's the English language version of the Bible. And there are other languages have like Hebrew in the Old Testament, la'ana, which means curse, and that means the same thing in Arabic and Hebrew. Now, the only clear reference that that this named entity occurs in the New Testament is in the book of Revelations, and the quote is, "The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter." And that's in Revelations 8, 10, and 11. Now, that could be that can mean a lot of things. I've heard I've heard it being interpreted as, well, back when I was growing up, during I don't know if you'd call it the height of the Cold War, or as the Cold War was winding down in the 60s and 70s. A lot of people thought that meant, ICBMs coming from the Soviet Union, the mutually assured destruction. We launch, they launch, they launch, we launch, and the whole world gets annihilated in thermonuclear war. And so that could be one person's interpretation of a great star falling from the sky. Others could be a meteorite, a comet, an asteroid. Could be a spaceship, like a giant kamikaze spaceship. Who knows? There's a lot of different, and that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But something falling from the sky and turn the waters bitter doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, it could mean it poisoned the water. If you've seen the movies, and sometimes you wonder, has Hollywood been conditioning us with like the movies with the alien invasions and occupation of planet Earth, movies like Armageddon and Deep Impact, where these giant asteroids and comets basically were going to cause an extinction level event. And well, only in Hollywood could something like that be averted. In real life, I don't think so. And depending on your school of beliefs, no one knows who's right, no one knows who's wrong. Could have been created 6,000 years ago. The universe could be 6,000 years old, or it could be billions of years old. Who knows? Who knows what really wiped out the dinosaurs? The prevailing theory, and let me stress that word theory, is before they discovered the crater down on the Yucatan Peninsula, the prevailing belief was that they died from, I think, volcanic eruptions. And then the prevailing theory, once that giant crater had been discovered, was that an asteroid had hit the Earth some 65 million years ago, and that wiped out the dinosaurs. And all you've got to do is look at the surface of the moon, and you can see it's been hit by a lot of things, or that could have been old volcanic eruptions. Who knows for sure what? None of us are really there to see it, so who knows what the truth is. But doing my research, I wanted to not use my speculation and observation because I'm just I dabble in astronomy because, it's just fascinating to me. But anyways, I wanted to, read through different publications and sites and try to find something, that I would basically say would be, compelling. And this one article I found is on a site called kRSchannel.com. And it says, does planet Nibiru exist? And is Nibiru approaching? We've all heard well, I don't know if we all have, but, a lot of people have heard, that this could be happening. But anyways, this is what they have to say about it. The new information on Nibiru is more mysterious than its own origins. Not too many people know the true details of Nibiru and why it exists in our solar system. So the author basically wants to give you some information. Now let me tell you some basics first about this planet. Planet Nibiru, which was referred by the Sumerians as Planet X, was supposedly the 12th planet in our solar system. And the true meaning of Planet Nibiru is planet of crossing. In the hydrophilic of the Sumerians and Egyptian, they talked about how Planet Nibiru had an elliptical orbit as opposed to our normal horizontal orbit, and it took around 750,000 years to come between Mars and Jupiter. And when it did, it created devastation on all the planets during its flyby. Archaeologists Zachariah Sitchin and Burak Eldam also suggested that this planet, which looks a lot like CR-105 with the similar orbit. However, the crossing path of CR-105 is very different than Nibiru or Planet X. Nibiru's 80% of orbit lies much further from the Sun, where CR-105's orbit is 60% away from the Sun and 40% near the rest of the planets. And according to historians, Tiamat, a planet which had lain between Mars and Jupiter around 510 million years ago, was a victim of Planet X as Tiamat collided with one of the moons of Nibiru. It crashed, broke into half, and as one half became the asteroid belt, the other half became Phobos, Mars, the moon of Mars. And while the other half is our home, planet Earth. Out of destruction comes life. And that's a quote from a Hindu ancient text, Bhagavad Gita. Now, this planet has known to be, and it depends on who you ask, 20 times bigger than Jupiter with a burning moon, which acts like Nibiru's personal sun. And since Nibiru goes much further away from our sun, the theory actually makes sense and stands out. The Anunnaki, who are supposedly citizens of Nibiru, came to planet Earth around 25,000 years ago and gave a lot of knowledge and detail to the developing humanoids, whom at the time didn't have the brain capacity or thinking power to comprehend what the Anunnaki were saying. Even the Mayans had predicted the existence of Nibiru, and according to them, a certain dark energy in the shape of a planet which will be coming near Earth in the distant future. And every time this planet came around, the entire civilization of Earth was wiped out. Now, James McCaney is an expert on planet Nibiru and Mayan history, explained that around 10,000 years ago, major devastation occurred, which destroyed many of the civilizations on our planet. And he also explained how ruined cities in South America were vanished, not because of war or plague, but major physical destruction here on Earth. And he also went on to say that before Nibiru passed by us 10,000 years ago, the North Pole was somewhere in the state of Wisconsin, while the South Pole was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Now, if he's right and this event did occur because of Planet X or Nibiru, then we shouldn't worry about it for the next 740,000 years or so, right? Well, no. Even as Nibiru crossed its path from between Jupiter and Mars, it's now surging upwards to make its longest route around the Sun, and that's due to the fact that its elliptical orbit goes in a roundabout very close to the sun on one end, while 80% of orbit is really far away from the sun. And that is why the earthquake that happened in Japan and Chile and other places could be due to the fact that the magnetic pull from Nibiru is increasing as it nears our plane, and the pull from Nibiru will increase gravitational force of each planet in a rubber band type effect. And you're not going to find this on Wikipedia, but as far as the Mayan 2012 doomsday theory is concerned, well, it's 2015, so that didn't happen. Anyways, Nibiru will not be showing up this fast, because even though the earthquakes are happening and floods are taking place, like what happened in Japan a couple of years ago, it's still a good 10 years away where the naked eye can detect it. And with that being said, I saw some video footage of what appeared to be like two suns. And why I never saw this, actually, I mean, well, it happened like, right at sun up. And, well, most of the time I'm asleep at sun up because I work really late at night, so I got to rest. But, that's one theory of that. I mean, again, we don't know if this is true or not. I've listened to a lot of, I listen to Coast AM a lot. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, when I was doing a lot of shows, and I would be getting back from shows really late at night, the studio really late at night, or rehearsals really late at night, and I'd listen to Coast AM, and it was fascinating, and I became a fan of the show, and I still am. So there's a lot of, to me, it's fascinating. Other people, I may have put people to sleep. I may have scared the living daylights out of you. Don't let that happen, because we don't know if this is true or not. I mean, everyone has to make their own, draw your own conclusions and do your own research. I always say that. Don't take my word for it, because I'm not an expert at anything. But I do have some audio to kind of back up what I'm saying. And again, all of this information will be posted on our website, thewakeupmissionshow.com, and on our Facebook page, the Wake Up Mission Radio Show. So if you want to check these links out later, feel free to do so. Do your own research, draw your own conclusions. It could be true, and then again, it might not be. Who the hell knows? Well, if it is, we'll all find out together. But anyways, I do have some audio, and most of the audio that I found, were really long, like 2 hours and stuff like that. Well, we don't have 2 hours, and those files are too large to upload anyway. So I just had to sift through a lot of different audio to find what I thought was good quality audio that would actually fit into our time frame. So we'll go ahead and get started on this one.
The men and women in the military has begun conducting briefings for dependents. These would be the dependents that are stationed near the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean, near the West Coast, the Pacific Ocean, and near the Gulf Coast. At these briefings, they're being told the following: that there's this planetary-sized object called Nibiru that's coming into our solar system. It's going to be causing very severe problems, much more so than it already is, very soon, and that they're being put on standby to bug out. They're being told that there'll be little notice, possibly 2 weeks or so, before they're given the notice to bug out. They're also, by the way, they're being shown a map. Advance 4 to 6 weeks is probably pretty likely. Probably not more than 3 or 4 months. So that's our belief. I hope we're wrong. I hope that this turns out to be incorrect information. If it is, well, that's great. If it's not, if it turns out to be correct, then you've got your heads up. So I asked the question this morning to all of you out there, to the several thousand of you listening to me on the morning of July 11th. What would you do if you had 6 years to prepare? What would you do if you had 6 months to prepare? What would you do if you had 6 weeks to prepare? Mike, it was 2 weeks ago today that I announced the information I received from two confidential sources. One was a confidential source who is a dependent of a Department of Defense employee, part of continuity of government contingency planning, by the way. Not all DOD and not all government employees are part of COG, continuity of government contingency planning. Anyway, at this briefing, which they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement before the briefing began, they were told that they were being put on standby for evacuation, that they may get as much as 2 weeks' notice, they may not, and they started telling these dependents about Nibiru, Planet X, and how this planetary-sized object was going to cause massive flooding on all coastal areas. And that was pretty much it for that source. The second source is in the Department of Homeland Security, and that source basically confirmed what the first source said without going any further on that. And then the following day, or the same day, I should say, you came up with your own sources, Mike, and why don't you tell us about those?
Well, the source that first told me about this, and I've been doing some digging since then, but the source that first told me about this is a director-level individual for a foreign intelligence agency that I have occasion to speak with now and then. And what I was told, and I was told this probably maybe 60 or 90 days ago, and I didn't put a lot of credence in it at the time, but as I've researched, I have to put more and more credence in it. And as a qualifier, I have to say this up front that, perhaps this is being floated as disinformation to discredit people and to discredit. So I have to give a caveat there. I don't think it is, but it could be just that type of effort. But I was told that to be very prepared on the dates of August 17th and the dates of September 26th, that a planet-sized object would be passing passing very, very near the Earth. And I was told that the closest distance would be maybe 5 to 10 Earth diameters. It would come that close, and that we should be be prepared for massive earthquakes, and as a result of those earthquakes, tsunami-level flooding in coastal areas. Now, since that time, I've done some more digging, and I spoke with intelligence sources within the U.S. who not only confirmed.
Now, I want to stop the audio to just clarify these dates. They didn't specify the year, and if it was this year or last year, well, it didn't happen, and this is all just speculation, but I had put that in my notes also to make sure I clarified that. So we'll go ahead and let this continue. Well, it's not going to. Well, ain't that a pain? Well, it won't let me advance the recording. I guess it doesn't have a pause. It's just stop, and then it resets. Well, anyways, during my research on this, I found this fascinating interview with this guy. He lived in Puerto Rico, and he claimed to have been abducted by aliens, and they had given him a pretty dire warning, and I thought this was really fascinating. So let's go ahead and get to this one. This one is a little longer, and I'm going to go ahead and let this play. I'm not going to stop it because, well, we just saw what happened. Once it stops, it stops. It doesn't pause.
On the morning of May 14th, 1988, Amaury Riviera, a young man from Puerto Rico, photographed a giant disk, followed and circled by two jet interceptors. What makes the sensational pictures even more interesting is Riviera's claim that he had contact with the occupants of this UFO.
Hello, my name is Amaury Rivera. I live in Puerto Rico, and back in 1988, I was working in a nightclub, and there was a musical group there. One of my cousins wanted me to photograph the musical group, and she loaned me a camera with some film. On my way back home, I encountered two small beings, two small strange men, which I didn't think were men from outer space, and they took me somewhere where there were other people besides myself, other human people, like from Puerto Rico, I guess. From here, another human being showed up. He claimed to be from a distant planet. He was dressed in black. He had a dark skin, but he was not a Negro. He had long black hair up to the shoulders, and he spoke to us with the mouth, verbally, and no telepathic speaking. He showed us various projections, which looked very real, the projections, and he informed us about a whole bunch of things that are even still incredible to me. Then they returned me to...
What did this holographic projection show?
The holographs were mainly... the first one that I can remember was like a short trip through space. We saw where he came from, where he said to be from. We saw his people. We saw the houses that they used. And the second one was about a meteor or a rock falling to Earth in the near future, which is going to cause a lot of havoc in the world. This would fall. It's going to fall in very near the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and those other small islands. But it's going to affect the whole world, not just Puerto Rico. The last one is that they projected was showing us how there was only going to be one government on the planet Earth. They'll be living on some sort of artificial island that's going to be floating in the middle of a dark, black, dirty sea. And then this man returned me to my car again, and left me somewhere different from where the whole ordeal had started. Apparently, it took me with car and all. After this, at this given time, I heard some jets in the sky, and I still had my cousin's camera, and I took the pictures, 4 of which I'm making public nowadays.
So the jets followed the UFO?
Yes, it was. They seemed to be surveilling it. I only got to capture just one of the jets in the photograph, but there were 3 of them. Or maybe I got in one of the photos one, and in the second or third I got one of the other ones, because they would go around it very far away, and while this one was closer, and turn, very far, very far. And by the time this one was coming back, another one was turning over there. There was always one or the other close to the object, to the UFO.
Jorge Martin has carefully investigated this case.
Rivera's case to me, is a very special one and a very important one, because in Amori's case, he was abducted and he was taken away by aliens. One of them was human-like, and 2 small creatures that they explained to him were some type of genetical or biological organic android that they made to do some chores outside, so they don't have to risk themselves in our environment. That's what they explained to him, the so-called human alien that he saw in the craft. And it's important also because of the evidences that he has on the case, because when he was released, he had a camera with him, and he was able to take pictures of the object that apparently had abducted him, the craft, flying saucer type, and also some jet fighters from the United States, excuse me, F-14 again. In most of these cases in the island, F-14s are involved with these situations of chasing and harassment and checking on these objects when they are seen in the different areas of the island. And he was able to get them in those pictures together. So this clearly, when you see those photographs, it's obvious that the government has been lying for many years, because there's the UFO there, and there's also the jet fighters dealing with the situation. which they denied for more than 4 years. It's there.
Were you able to locate any other witnesses?
That's what I was going to explain at this moment, Michael. The Amoris case is also very important because I have several people who apparently had been contacted by the same alien that abducted Amori and the small ones that were with him in a separate fashion. They have nothing to do with Amori's incident. This being, this human-like alien, is contacting people all around the area of the southwest of Puerto Rico. I have people from the town of Yauco who seem to have been contacted by this man. I have this fisherman, Andres Maldonado, who I got in contact with Amori because he told me several things Amori had told no one before, only I knew them, about the name of the alien and all the details that he was using to check on the people who really may have been in contact with the same being the night he was abducted, because there were about 14 other people there in the craft that night. And when Maldonado told me all this information that he couldn't know because he was not involved with the Morris case, I got them together. And at this moment I have about 3 different people who seem to have been in contact with the same alien. So they are doing something, and they are getting in contact with more and more people and preparing people for something. And this is very important because all this corroborates Amori's incident also.
Other witnesses contacted Amori himself.
So far, between 1988 and 1992, I've been able to localize 7 of these people. Because I've gone on different TV shows and different articles, and I've always been asking if anybody remembers anything similar happening to them, and that year, during that time, Mother's Day, to please get in touch with me. And I have gotten in touch with hundreds of people, but out of the hundreds, 7 definitely were there with me. I still have 7 to go. Maybe I'll never find them. Maybe they'll see this.
You investigated the Rivera case, Colonel Stevens. What was your impression?
Well, of course, Jorge Martin took me to meet Amaury Rivera, shortly after I got there with a Mexican team to study some phenomena in Puerto Rico. And when I first met Amaury, he was very reluctant to describe his case because it still frightened him to think about it. And it took some time before we could develop enough confidence where he was comfortable talking to us about the case. But he would still tremble when he thought about it. He would turn pale. He'd become weak. He was frightened. But he has now reviewed the details and the points in sufficient length and depth that he can face the experience without the trauma, which he has learned to do. And today, or yesterday, we saw for the first time that he is able to manage his emotions well enough to describe that contact in considerable detail.
You carefully analyzed the Rivera photographs.
We took the pictures, yes. We took the pictures taken by Amaury Rivera to a NASA consultant facility in Scottsdale, where we put them through a computer analysis using latest state-of-the-art equipment. And we found that both the disc-shaped craft seen in the photographs and the aircraft are considerable distance from the camera, between 3 and 5 miles. We discovered that the jet fighter was moving and that the disc-shaped craft was moving relatively slow or not moving at all. We discovered that the ambient light conditions were correct in all respects. We were able to eliminate montages, paste-ups, reflections, models, all kinds of forms of technical manipulation of photographs, and we had to conclude that the pictures were real and that they were exactly as described by the witness when he took the photographs.
Noch dazu wurde Amaury Rivera eingeschüchtert und unter Druck gesetzt, seine Fotos herauszugeben.
Well, a short time after the incident, 3 men showed up at my home in Puerto Rico, and one of them stood in their car downstairs, and they claimed to be from CIA, and they handed me 2 pieces of paper, which I was so nervous I couldn't really read, but I remember seeing the letter CIA, which is the intelligence agency from the United States, and they said that it would be easier and better for me if I handed them the photographs and the negatives, but they did not say, what photographs or what negatives. They didn't specify, and I just told them that I did not know what they were talking about. And they said it would be easier because we have an order to register your house, to look through your house. And I said, well, go ahead, be my guest and look. And they looked, but they couldn't find them because I had hid them very well.
Well, is this guy full of it, looking for his 15 minutes, or was he telling the truth? Well, who knows? He seems to be very convinced of his experience that it actually did happen. And if you want to see this, if you want to see this interview with him for yourself, then go to our website, thewakeupmissionshow.com, or our Facebook page, The Wake Up Mission Radio Show. All this information is posted there, and you can check it out for yourself and draw your own conclusions. But one thing I wanted to interject before we get back to Nibiru, I've seen, watching like Science Channel, Discovery, and what have you, what the shows with aliens, and they, one thing that most of the scientists do agree upon is, for long distance space travel, carbon-based organic life forms wouldn't fare too well unless, they had like some kind of faster, some way to travel long distances over short periods of time, like wormholes, faster than light, warp speed, whatever you want to call it. And that, artificial, if you want to call them robots, androids, or what have you, well, they had theorized that, when people talk about their experiences with abductions with the Greys, that the Greys aren't actually, they may be sentient life forms, but the Greys are actually these, like what this guy was explaining, the Greys are actually, like an artificial biomechanical life. So that I thought that was interesting when he mentioned that, when they said, they do like, menial tasks and chores that wouldn't be safe for a carbon-based organic life form. So, I just thought, oh, okay, that kind of connects those dots, and that's what we try to do here. And again, this is all just theory. Could be true, could not be. We don't know. None of us were there. But it's a fascinating subject. Well, for me anyway. So, when I, doing more research, on this website called Inquisitor, this just happened back this past January. And it said that, has science just admitted Planet X Nibiru exists? And believers say that the people that believe this, wholeheartedly, they think that full disclosure is coming. And, we've been wrong about other things, but, when you think about, like in the audio earlier where the guy was talking about, the DOD employees being told to get prepared to bug out, the underground tunnels, all that, it kind of ties in, maybe, Jade Helm was not, the cover story was it was going to be training for, dealing with domestic terrorism, when it's actually dealing with a global cataclysm. I mean, we don't know. But anyways, from this article that John Thomas Didymus, I guess that's how you say that, DidYmus. Well, anyways, he says that astronomers may have inadvertently revived the Planet X Nibiru conspiracy, because this has dominated the internet a few years ago. It kind of kicked up when that meteorite, when it hit in Russia a couple years ago. Well, anyways, following a lot of the announcements by scientists of evidence that there are at least 2 planets larger than Earth in our solar system beyond Pluto, they say that the believers of this system, the Planet X Nibiru Cataclysm believers, have been saying that the governments are preparing to disclose the truth to the masses. And scientists had announced in a new study published in the journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society letters that there's at least 2 planets likely bigger than Earth that are undetected in the outer fringes of the solar system, and they are thought to exist beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto. Now, according to Professor Carlos de la Fuente Marcos from the Complutense University of Madrid, who led the study, the evidence supporting the conclusion comes from observations of a belt of space rocks known as the Extreme Trans-Neptunian Objects, or ETNOs, orbiting the Sun beyond Neptune. And these rocks were found to show an unexpected orbital characteristics that can be explained only by assuming that their expected paths are being distorted by some massive but unseen astronomical body nearby. And it was quoted as saying the excess of objects with unexpected orbital parameters makes us believe there are some invisible forces are altering the distribution of the orbital elements of the ETNO, and we consider that the most probable explanation is that other unknown planets exist beyond Neptune and Pluto, and the exact number is uncertain, given that the data is limited, but our calculations suggest that there are at least 2 planets and probably more within the confines of our solar system. Now, the term Planet X, it has its origin among astronomers in the period after the discovery of Neptune in 1846. And after Neptune was discovered, several astronomers speculated that there might still be another planet beyond Neptune, and Percival Lowell proposed the Planet X hypothesis to explain observed irregularities in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. Now, at first, the astronomers thought they had found Planet X when Pluto was discovered in 1930 by Clyde Tombaugh, but they soon realized that Pluto was too small to explain the observed effects on Uranus and Neptune, because these 2 planets are gas giants. They're not as large as Jupiter or Saturn, but they're a lot bigger than Earth. They're huge planets. Anyways, this realization sparked a renewed search for Planet X, and it was abandoned in the 90s after analysis of measurements of Neptune obtained from the Voyager 2 suggested that the inaccuracies in the estimation of the mass of Neptune could explain the observed inconsistencies in the Uranus orbit, and that they kind of just abandoned the hypothesis. But the discovery of hundreds of so-called trans-Neptunian objects, or TNOs, and most of which were identified as part of the Kuiper belt, consisting mainly of icy bodies with orbits similar to Pluto's, and it led Pluto to being demoted from the status of a planet to a dwarf planet and a member of the Kuiper belt. Well, I've actually heard this lady on Coast to Coast AM, Nancy Leader, and she's a fascinating interview. Back in the 90s when they were giving up on this, Nancy Leader founded a website called Zeta Talk and claimed she was in contact with extraterrestrials from the Zeta Reticuli star system, and she proclaims that she's been instructed to warn mankind that a large planetary body she called Planet X would pass into the inner solar system and cause our planet to undergo a pole shift that will destroy civilization. And she also claims that Planet X, it's about 4 times the size of Earth, would arrive in May of 2003 with catastrophic consequences. Well, here we are 12 years later, that didn't happen. And others who had adopted her idea associated it with the December 21, 2012 Mayan apocalypse. Well, that didn't happen. and they adopted the term Nibiru, and it's originally a technical term in ancient Babylonian astronomy, but derived from, it was basically derived from internet doomsday cults from the work of Soviet-born American writer Zechariah Sitchin, who claimed that civilization was originated by the Anunnaki, that race of people that they believe exist from planet Nibiru. Well, the identification of leaders Planet X seemed natural due to Sitchin's theory in his book, The 12th Planet, that ancient Babylonian lore indicates there is an undiscovered planet called Nibiru beyond Neptune, and the Anunnaki lived there. And, well, after the efforts to debunk the theory by emphasizing that science itself has abandoned its earlier quest for Planet X, the revival of the scientific Planet X will inevitably help to re-energize the doomsday movement. So here we are again. So that, you know, there's a lot of talk. You know, it's been met with ridicule, and even by those that spent, you know, hours studying in an attempt to debunk it, only to find that they are now believers, and there are evident stirrings of feelings of vindication among these Cataclysm believers who have long insisted that the government had been covering up the truth about the existence of this planet. So I guess we'll all find out together. You know, again, you know, there's nothing set in stone, and this is all fascinating stuff. But I wanted to run some audio because if this really isn't happening, why are they talking about it? And it's not necessarily this subject, but I don't know when this occurred, but they were talking about, you know, this particular type of event in Congress. So take a listen.
Thanks for watching YouTube. So this was some good work here. Thank you, Marcy. Great catch. Appreciate you passing this on. This is from Third Rock from the Sun TV show back in, I think this is 1996. This is the first season. I used to like this show, actually. Not too bad. Anyway, take a listen.
And yet everyone on the planet gets all worked up about these pointless little behaviors, blissfully unaware of the great vaporizing meteor due in 2015. Which obviously doesn't exist because I'm kidding!
You detected even a small one, like the one that detonated in Russia, headed for New York City in 3 weeks. What would we do? Bend over and what?
No, Congressman, that is, I don't, again, I have to go back to what I said before. These are very rare events. From the information that we have on asteroids that we've discovered of all sizes, we don't know of one that will threaten the population of the United States, in 3 weeks. And we are trying very diligently, as I said before, with the President's budget, to put ourselves in a position where we advance the technology such that 3 weeks will not be something that causes us to panic, because we will be able to respond. We are where we are today because, you all told us to do something, and between the administration and the Congress, the funding to do that did not. The bottom line is always, the funding did not come, and I don't care whose fault it is or if it's anybody's fault. We all know what we're facing today, and we're all sitting here today as the Congress and the administration try to figure out sequestration, something that never should have happened, nobody planned to happen, but we're facing it today. And so the answer to you is, if it's coming in 3 weeks, pray.
And I second that motion from this gentleman. Be prepared, because, there's really no way to prove or disprove any of this. And it's a fascinating subject. There are thousands of, well, I don't know, but thousands may be a stretch, but there's a lot of hours of audio of this on YouTube. Now, I've got one other clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, and it was said that it was from a NASA whistleblower, and a lot of it was more visual than audio because they were showing like some underground tunnels and structures that had been built. But he does have some, some fairly legitimate information. So we'll play a few minutes of this.
The panic and havoc seen in the Russian Urals last winter when a meteor the size of a house exploded in the skies, well, we could be set for a repeat. Scientists say the huge rock might not have been flying solo as first thought, but rather as part of a group of asteroids which still pose a threat to Earth. RT's Lindsay France now joining me live to tell us more about this. Lindsay, good to see you. Oh gosh, let the panic begin. But before we get into what could be what some are already calling the buddies of this asteroid that came down earlier this year, can you remind us exactly what happened back in February?
Yeah, that's right, Rory. Who can forget the asteroid on the 15th of February hit around 9:20 local time. An 11,000-ton rock, 18 meters wide, crashed into Chelyabinsk, of course, the mountains that separate Europe and Asia. We've got some sound of what the Russian dash camera, so widely used in this country, actually caught that very important morning, February 15th. Let's listen to what we've got. Very dramatic video there, and when that story came out, people were very, very shocked because we all wanted to know why it wasn't detected, and it scared, obviously, a lot of people. No one was killed in this. More than 1,000 were injured, but no one lost their lives, and that was what was such a shock to so many in this situation, and that is the fear, is this went undetected. So that's why scientists are trying to figure out if there are more, possibly, on their way.
I mean, certainly, Lindsay, it was an early morning commute when this was going on.
Of course.
You were at work. I was here at work as well. Bloggers were going ballistic over this. And when you were just showing the footage there of windows exploding from buildings there, I suppose the sonic boom or whatever it is, I mean, this was a monster.
It was huge.
And it caused massive chaos and a fair amount of panic as well. The dash cam videos are just absolutely startling. But the news today, Lindsay, is apparently that monster rock may not have been alone.
Exactly. Now, it is what scientists are calling sibling asteroids. And here's how it works. So, as I mentioned, the asteroid went undetected, obviously frightening everyone. And so what scientists did is they ran billions of simulations to find sibling asteroids that may have been on a similar orbital path to the one that hit in Chelyabinsk. Look at that. It's just astonishing. And what they found is nearly 20 different asteroids that are on this similar path. They span between 5 and 200 meters across, and they could one day follow their sibling to Earth if scientists, if they are actually following this asteroid on its similar path. Now, scientists do think it broke up. The large asteroid itself broke up about 40,000 years ago, creating all of these other rocks that are floating through space. But don't panic just yet, because scientists do also say that they haven't gotten a good 2-year chunk of time to monitor these asteroids. They've only gotten a very...
And they just keep going on about that. Now, the research that I did about Nibiru and Wormwood were, these could... One thing one of the main consensuses that I found was that it has a lot of Nibiru or Wormwood has a lot of junk floating around with it. It's not coming by itself if it is. And, these asteroid events that periodically occur. I mean, if you think back, the Tunguska event, I mean, that was around 100 years ago. And that was pretty gnarly and massive. Hit out in Siberia. Well, 100 years in geologic and space-time, that's like a blink of an eye. But anyways, one of the theories of Wormwood is there is an entire solar system, which some people who believe in Nibiru has its own sun and other planets and moons coming with it. And that's going to pass through our solar system. And there could be a lot of disruption if this actually did happen. It could, change the face of the solar system and could wipe out planet Earth. I mean, look at the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt. Could that be evidence from earlier collisions with the Wormwood event or the Nibiru event? Was the asteroid belt actually a planet at one time? Was the Kuiper belt a full planet at one time? You have to think about all these things. And, like we were all up in arms about Jade Helm 15, that could have just been an exercise, like I'd mentioned earlier, in a cover story. Like Mars, there's theories that Mars has already been colonized. Could at one time Mars have had, civilization? I mean, just a few weeks ago, they, kind of came out and said that, well, we found water on Mars. Well, at one time, was Mars like Earth? Did civilization exist there? And since we're obviously, have been told that we're aiming to go back to Mars, could it be to recolonize Mars and figure out a way to do some type of terraforming to make it a habitable planet? Because it may, Earth might be in the crosshairs. And like I said, I was just being a little facetious there at the beginning. This with the Coast to Coast AM theme, where this isn't even remotely close to being as good as Coast to Coast AM. They're really good at what they do. But anyways, a subject that I find absolutely fascinating, and I hope that you do too, is the theory of Planet X, Nibiru, and Wormwood. Now, as you know, in the Bible, Wormwood it's mentioned in the book of Revelations, actually, and it's a translation. I guess it is it's from Greek. The Greek text is absinthos, and that translates into English as wormwood, and that's the English language version of the Bible. And there are other languages have like Hebrew in the Old Testament, la'ana, which means curse, and that means the same thing in Arabic and Hebrew. Now, the only clear reference that that this named entity occurs in the New Testament is in the book of Revelations, and the quote is, the third archaeologists Zachariah Sitchin and Barak Eldam also suggested that this planet, which looks a lot like CR-105 with the similar orbit. However, the crossing path of CR-105 is very different than Nibiru or Planet X. Nibiru's 80% of orbit lies much further from the Sun, where CR-105's orbit is 60% away from the Sun and 40% near the rest of the planets. And according to historians, Tiamat, a planet which had lain between Mars and Jupiter around 510 million years ago, was a victim of Planet X as Tiamat collided with one of the moons of Nibiru. It crashed, broke into half, and as one half became the asteroid belt, the other half became Phobos, Mars, the moon of Mars. And while the other half is our home, planet Earth. Out of destruction comes life. And that's a quote from a Hindu ancient text, Bhagavad Gita. Now, this planet has known to be, and it depends on who you ask, 20 times bigger than Jupiter, with a burning moon which acts like Nibiru's personal sun. And since Nibiru goes much further away from our sun, the theory actually makes sense and stands out. The Anunnaki, who are supposedly citizens of Nibiru, came to planet Earth around 25,000 years ago and gave a lot of knowledge and detail to like the movies with the alien invasions and occupation of planet Earth, movies like Armageddon and Deep Impact, where these giant asteroids and comets basically were going to cause an extinction level event. And well, only in Hollywood could something like that be averted. In real life, I don't think so. And depending on your school of beliefs, no one knows who's right, no one knows who's wrong. Could have been created 6,000 years ago. The universe could be 6,000 years old, or it could be billions of years old. Who knows? Who knows what really wiped out the dinosaurs? The prevailing theory, and let me stress that word theory, is before they discovered the crater down on the Yucatan Peninsula, the prevailing belief was that they died from, I think, volcanic eruptions. And then the prevailing theory, once that giant crater had been discovered, was that an asteroid had hit the Earth some 65 million years ago, and that wiped out the dinosaurs. And all you got to do is look at the surface of the moon, and you can see it's been hit by a lot of things, or that could have been old volcanic eruptions. Who knows for sure? What? None of us are really there to see it, so who knows what the truth is? But doing my research, I wanted to not use my speculation and observation because the angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. And that's in Revelations 8, 10, and 11. Now, that can mean a lot of things. I've heard I've heard it being interpreted as, well, back when I was growing up, during the I don't know if you'd call it the height of the Cold War, or as the Cold War was winding down in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people thought that meant, ICBMs coming from the Soviet Union, the mutually assured destruction. We launch, they launch, they launch, we launch, and the whole world gets annihilated in thermonuclear war. And so that could be one person's interpretation of a great star falling from the sky. Others could be a meteorite, a comet, an asteroid. Could be a spaceship, like a giant kamikaze spaceship. Who knows? There's a lot of different, and that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But something falling from the sky and turn the waters bitter doesn't necessarily mean. It could mean it poisoned the water. If you've seen the movies, and sometimes you wonder, has Hollywood been conditioning us with, I'm just saying, I dabble in astronomy because, it's just fascinating to me. But anyways, I wanted to, read through different publications and sites and try to find something, that I would basically say would be, compelling. And this one article I found is on a site called kRSchannel.com. And it says, does planet Nibiru exist? And is Nibiru approaching? We've all heard I don't know if we all have, but, a lot of people have heard, that this could be happening. But anyways, this is what they have to say about it. The new information on Nibiru is more mysterious than its own origins. Not too many people know the true details of Nibiru and why it exists in our solar system. So the author basically wants to give you some information. Now, let me tell you some basics first about this planet. Planet Nibiru, which was referred by the Sumerians as Planet X, was supposedly the 12th planet in our solar system. And the true meaning of Planet Nibiru is planet of crossing. and the hydrophilic of the Sumerians and Egyptian, they talked about how planet Nibiru had an elliptical orbit, as opposed to our normal horizontal orbit, and it took around 750,000 years to come between Mars and Jupiter. And when it did, it created devastation on all the planets during its flyby.